All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Danial Experience. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is Daniel. I am the psychology student. I'm the person who's going to talk about philosophy, psychology, motivation, everything you need to know about life. Basically, I got you. And not to mention current events. Speaking of current events, there's a young lady who's been in the news nonstop for the past week now. Her name is Simone Biles. I don't know if you've heard about this. If you're not big into gymnastics, don't worry, I'm not big in it either. Basically, the story with this young lady is this. Arguably, not arguably, maybe inarguably, the greatest women's gymnastics athlete to come out of America. And she's in the news because she recently withdrew from an Olympic event due to her mental health. She said something along the lines of like, folks, I don't feel comfortable continuing. I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna let other people take my place. Now this is huge, right? This is very problematic for a lot of reasons. Imagine if LeBron James, Game 7, NBA Finals, first quarter goes, guys, I'm not really feeling it, right? That's your top player, right? That's your Cristiano Ronaldo, that's your LeBron James, that's your Floyd Mayweather. That's the number one person of the team. And then when they, take a back step because of their health, it hurts the entire team. So we had two giant dialogues going. Number one, we had the more conservative-leaning people. Oh, by the way, folks, for people who don't know, this is actually quite interesting. If you look up the psychologist by the name of Jonathan Haidt, I believe that's H-A-I-D-T. Jonathan Haidt is a social psychologist, and he wrote a book. And this book is essentially about liberals and conservatives and the differing in their thinking and their psychology. And one thing that he found was that people who are more conservative, and this is really specifically for America, people who are more conservative and more right-leaning, they tend to take loyalty. It means a lot more to them than people who are more liberal, more progressive, let's say. So if someone is burning the American flag, 8 times out of 10, it's a more conservative guy who's standing up and who's upset about it. So naturally, when Simone Biles does this, it's that side of the audience who kind of stands up and I don't want to say calls her a coward, but really looks down on her, and they look at her as abandoning her teammates and quitting and giving up, and they were really kicking a girl when she was down. Then you have the other side of the argument who goes, you know what, we're happy that mental health is being talked about. It should be talked about, and this young lady shouldn't continue. If she's not feeling fit, there's no need to continue, and we should put her safety first. So those are kind of two of the arguments. I don't know if you've heard it. I don't know what your own arguments are, but if you haven't, that's the catching up. My own opinion of it is this. Folks, I think health is number one. No matter where you are, no matter what the situation is, whether it be physical or mental. I think mental is a little worse because people can't see mental, right? You can see a broken leg. You can see a messed up neck or a torn something, eventually with scans and whatnot, but it's hard to see depression. You can see the overt behaviors, the symptoms of someone who's depressed. So they're sleeping more, they're eating more, they're engaging in some sort of behaviors that might not come across as normal, but you can't really see depression itself. And for that, it can be very sneaky. It can be very, it can go undetected a lot of times if people aren't aware. My own personal opinion is this. If you're taking a back step due to health, whether that be physical or mental, it's basically your safety we're talking about. I can't criticize you for that. If someone says, hey, you know what? I feel like my health is in a place where I could jeopardize my performance. Like I could fall, I could really hurt myself because I'm not in the right place. Like, what am I supposed to say? Go out there, hurt yourself for your country. Come on, man. So by no means do I think it's appropriate to kick someone when they're down, when they are reporting health problems. I think it is 100% okay, and I think she did the right thing by stepping down. Now, going to the other side of the argument, I would not call her a hero. A lot of people are calling her heroic and brave and courageous. The only thing courageous that she did was she said, hey, listen, I can't do this. And it takes guts. It takes a lot of courage to be an athlete of that caliber and say, I'm not in a good place. It's not an easy thing to do, so that does take courage. But she's not a hero, in my opinion. She actually did the opposite. She literally took the cape off and threw it on the ground. Not literally, but figuratively. Because she went, hey, I can't do this. Folks, in my opinion, Simone is not a hero. And she's not a villain. But you know what she is? She's a human, like the rest of us. She has her strengths. She has her flaws. She is freaking good at gymnastics. And that's an understatement. But why do we have to hold people up to such high pedestals? Because when we put you on such a high pedestal, when you fall, like inevitably every human does, it's going to hurt that much more, right? So when people put her up to be like this amazing, crazy hero, and then there's nothing heroic about withdrawing. I don't think that's heroic at all. I don't think she deserves a standing ovation because she withdrew from an Olympic event, letting herself down, letting her team down, in my opinion. But I do think she deserves a pat on the back. I do think she deserves a, hey, You did the right thing, putting your health first. Good for you. Nothing more, nothing less. That's my opinion of it. I'm not gonna, oh, you're a hero, you did this incredible thing. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. But you put your health first, and I think you did the right thing ultimately. So, good for you. That's good. Preserve your health. You're young. That's my take on it. What do you think, folks? If someone wants to back out of something, whether it be a physical injury or mental injury, what is that? Is that all right? Is that okay to do or no? And at what level? Is it okay to do at a regular event? How about the Olympics? Arguably the biggest sporting event in the world, with exception to the FIFA World Cup. So that's something that you got to decide for yourselves. So that was interesting. It was very interesting to see people kind of divided on that subject, divided on that matter. Folks, let's talk about books. I don't know if you're reading books right now. I don't know if you've read books recently. Unfortunately, I know that there's a plethora of people who, once they're done high school or college or university, they don't touch another book again. Like, they just kind of read it just for the sake of they have to for the class, but they don't read it for their own sake, and I think it's really unfortunate. Recently, I've looked at a bunch of classic literature and that I've written down in terms of like a book list, and I thought to myself, okay, throughout my life, at different stages, whenever I have time, whenever workload from school gets a little easier, I want to read some of these books. One of them that I've just read is 1984 by George Orwell. Have you read this book? If so, you know how dope it is. If not, let's talk about it. Now, folks, whenever I want to talk about a book, I do not spoil the book. This way, for anybody listening who wants to get the book, I'm not going to spoil it, because like a movie, I want you to experience the intro, the middle, the climax, and the conclusion on your own without knowing anything about it. So I'm going to give you my review without any spoilers. So just a general kind of picture of what you're going into is this. It's a book, and it's in relation to dystopia. Now, they're probably more familiar with utopia. Utopia is this place of everything's perfect, it's paradise, it's heaven, there's no evil, there's no killing, everything's great. Dystopia is the opposite. It's a society full of hate and killing, death, deceit, manipulation, lying. So it's terrible. It's the exact opposite. Everything that would be good in utopia, it's the exact opposite. It's dystopia. So you gotta understand this to really appreciate this book. This book was written in 1948, right? 1948, George Orwell writes this book. Now, what is 1948? Let's break this down. World War II was coming to an end closely. World War II had already ended. World War II was from 1939 until 1945, if I'm not mistaken. So World War II ends in 1945. And mind you, this was the one where the Nazis were really, really big in this one, because the Nazi group developed in 1933. They developed in 1933, and so they had a huge role to play in Second World War. And also, what's important to take note is Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, and their role and how they were involved. Now, you don't have to know much about World War II, but it's interesting to know kind of where George Orwell was in his mindset, and I'm not trying to give too much away. But basically, it's 1948, it's a couple years after World War II, and he's writing this book, and he's predicting what the future could be like what a dystopian future could be like. And he writes this book about 40 years in the future. And the first thing that's going to catch you off guard is, this book is very well written. I mean, the year is 2021 right now. This book was written in 1948, and it's easy to understand. It's easy to comprehend. It's concise. It's clear. You'd think reading a book like this would take you a little bit. You'd think some of the terminology used wouldn't be super relevant to this state. That is not the case. It's very well written. It's clear. It's concise. You are told about things in a certain order so that it makes sense to you. It's great in that sense. The plot is very interesting because it keeps you guessing and you're not really sure when something's going to happen. And just when you feel like things are getting stagnant, like they're getting a little bit bored, all of a sudden something changes. It takes a turn. It goes a completely different way. There's a new character introduction, maybe a character gets killed off, and it does get quite fascinating. Now, as I'm reading this book, I couldn't help but figure out and just notice all of the crazy, scary similarities between that book and the society we are living in right now. When you read a book that was written in 1948, and the year is 2021, that is over 70 years ago. And some of the things that this man in 1948 predicted that would happen in 1984 were true. Some of them did come to fruition. Some of them in the year 2021 are in fruition right now, and I see it in front of me and I go, oh my God, he was right. George Orwell predicted X, Y, and Z. Now, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to spoil it for you, but man, it's one of those books where it's easy to read, it's concise, so don't think, oh man, I'm only 18, I'm not going to understand. No, you will. I would recommend this book for anyone, I would say above the age of 16, when you're starting to think a little bit more critically, and really you want to understand the dynamics of a society and how a society works. If you're interested in dictatorship, if you're interested about figuring out how Nazi Germany became Nazi Germany, if you're interested about learning about places like Soviet Union, like North Korea, and how a society begins to shape itself under a dictatorship, and the small things that all add up that lead to that sort of a world, it is very fascinating. It is so plain, so simple, yet absolutely brilliant. Like, as you read the book, you're like, oh my God, this makes complete sense. Like, this is exactly why that would happen. And it really is one of those books where you read it and it's one of those where it's not like it has super abstract topics and it's hard to, like, you're sitting there thinking about it, like, I don't understand. It makes sense. It's understand you're walking through it, and constantly you just keep applying it to the real world. You go, oh my God, that's like when this happened here. Oh, that's exactly like what they're doing here right now. And the amount of things that you can apply is really quite fascinating. So I would 100% recommend this book, folks. I know you can find it on Amazon. You can probably find it on a bunch of other places. You can even find the audiobook for free on YouTube. There's several different YouTubers who have uploaded the audiobook, so that's great if you want to listen to it like that. But again, ebook is online. I know for Amazon for sure. The book itself, physical copy, that's also out there. So see what you like, see what makes the most sense for you. But again, I would recommend this book for anyone who's interested in just one of those classic literatures that you have to read. Over the age of 16, you want to learn about dystopia in a sense of how a society could go wrong and how it can be so scarily predictive of the society we are living in right now. So if any of those things interest you, I read the book, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I would give it 2 thumbs up. If you're looking for a next book to read, I would highly recommend you consider George Orwell's 1984. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I did. So, enjoy. I said the word enjoy a lot, because you can tell I enjoyed it quite a bit. Folks, I put something interesting on my Instagram today. It was today or yesterday. Well, basically, I posed 2 questions. I said, one, I said, in this day and age, in 2021, is a man expected to pay on the first date? And I posed a second question, and I said, should the man be the leader / initiator in the relationship? These are important questions to take up. 40 years ago, these questions would be silly to ask. Like, you'd ask these questions, people would laugh at you. They go, of course. And what kind of question is that? But now we're in a place where things are not so. They're not as obvious. And we're in a really interesting shift of kind of power dynamics and gender norms, right? We're changing from a place of where the norm was that a woman stays home and she takes care of the house and the kids and the cleaning, to the point where, if I'm not mistaken, we have more women going to colleges and universities than men are. And I really think that in the next 10, 15, 20 years or so, you know how men are making more money than women? And that could be for a plethora of reasons. That could be because there's more housewives than there are house dads. That could be because men just picked jobs where they can be working more, whereas women, maybe if they were to pick jobs, they pick jobs that are more part-time. Obviously, sexist things are also involved there. But I think we're really going to get to a world where women, if they do not equal men in terms of pay, they might even get more. Like, if women are going to college and universities more than men are. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. I always had old school beliefs. I thought it is a man's duty to pay on the first date. I'm old school like that. I thought it was a man's duty to be the leader in the relationship, to initiate, right? If he sees a cute girl, it is his job to go and talk to her. He initiates the conversation. He asks her out. When they're sitting down, he reaches for the bill. If a robber breaks into the house, he takes the step forward. He is the initiator, right? So that's kind of what I see it in my mind. And it was interesting to see some people's comments. There were a lot more people. I mean, the poll is still going on right now. It's only been out for about 10 hours. But there was a lot more people who disagree with both of those statements, who thought that a man should not be expected to pay on the first date. And secondly, that a man is not or should not necessarily be the leader/initiator in a relationship. Now let's break that down. With respect to the first one, a man should not be expected to pay on the first date. The only way that I can conceive this idea and begin to agree with it is this. If we got to a place, like generally speaking, roughly 8 out of 10 women, they want to date a man who's taller than them, who makes more money than them, and sometimes who's older than them. It's more likely that you'll see a girl dating someone who's older than her, but not all the time. What happens if she's dating a guy and the guy's making $40,000 a year and she's making $120,000 a year? They go out on a date. Should the man be expected to pay? And this is early in the relationship, so not later on when their bank accounts are merged. This is early. He's making 30 or 40, she's making 120. So even me who believed that it was a man's obligation to pay on the first date, I'm going, man, this is interesting because this is the first time in human history that we've really had this dilemma, if you will. Generally speaking, if we're talking about the 80s, let's say the 80s and 70s, the chances of a woman making more than her husband were low. They're relatively rare. So thus, when a man paid, it would make more sense. You make more money, right? You're inviting me out. It only makes sense that you would pay. But, and I literally just thought about this today, and I didn't want to think about it too much because I like to do my organic thinking in front of the camera. I'm not a big fan of having like scripts and things written out. I want it to be natural so we can kind of think and walk through this together. But just the little sliver that I was kind of going to get to is, if a woman is making substantially more than the man, does that really defeat that idea of, a man has to pay, or it's expected of a man to pay? Because he's not making more than her, right? What if they go out to like a 5-star restaurant, and the guy's again making 30,000, which it's okay. It's all right. Depends on where you're living. And the girl's making 120. And what would happen then? Like, would you just expect, like, what if we change the norm? Because people believe that we live in a patriarchy. And a patriarchy meaning a male-dominated world. Now, that's an interesting subject for another day. But let's go with that for a second. If we believe that men control everything and men have the best jobs, men make the most amount of money, it's a world that's amazing for men. When we get to a place when a woman makes more money than a man, my first question is, would a woman even date a man who doesn't make that much money? Like that's one thing that I've always wondered. I could imagine a man who makes $120,000 a year dating a woman who makes $10,000 a year. But I can't imagine it the other way around. I can't imagine a woman making $120,000 a year dating a dude who's making $20,000 or $30,000 a year. I don't know why that is. And that's weird, because we're going to get into this really weird place where she doesn't believe in the traditional gender norms, right? Because she wants to work. She doesn't want to be a housewife. So she's making 6 figures, which is great. But what if she still wants him to at least match her in terms of income? Like, what if you have all these women who go to school, get PhDs, now they're making 6 figures, when the average guy is making $50,000 a year? If he cannot match her income, how big of a turnoff is that for her? And I don't know. I don't know, frankly. I'm asking you, and my curiosity is this. What would a girl rather do? And if you're a lady listening to this, ask yourself this. Would you rather date someone, and I don't know what your height is, but let's say someone shorter than you, but makes a substantial amount more than you in terms of salary? Or would you date someone taller than you, but they make a substantial amount less than you do? Which one would you do? Which one would you pick? And for the gentlemen listening to this, which one do you think they would pick? Obviously, other things are important, personality, your chemistry, are you compatible? Of course, but just generally speaking. But if we were in a situation like that where women do start making more than men, maybe I would change my narrative from I expect the man to pay to whoever has the power in the situation, or whoever has the more appropriate skills and knowledge in that moment should deal with the situation. So if the woman's making more than the man, maybe I would think that the woman should pay. I mean, it could be a split by all means, but I would lean towards either a split between the two parties, or again, if there's a huge gap between income, maybe I would lean towards the person who's making more money to pay the bill. And I'm literally just thinking this as I'm saying it out loud. My next question about is, should the man be be the leader slash initiator in the situation. I got a huge blowback from this one. A bunch of people said no. A bunch of women said no. Now here's tough, right? These polls, they can be a little vague. Now, when I'm thinking leader, what am I thinking? I'm thinking you're at a party. I'm thinking you see someone that you like. She sees you. As a man, isn't it your job to go over and talk to and strike up conversation, right? Because one of the things that I think of, if you're not leading, if you're not initiating, then you'd sit back. You'd wait for her to come over and talk to you and start conversation and ask you out for drinks. And I don't know if women prefer that. I don't know if they prefer it both ways. But I guess maybe other people interpreted me saying, oh, a man's a leader in the relationship, or a man should be the initiator in the relationship, as a man should, whatever a man says goes. You know, he'll let you know what restaurant you're going to, when you're going out, what you're allowed to do, who you're allowed to see. Maybe they took it in that context, you know, and I don't think that necessarily. But again, going back to those earlier examples that I listed, if you're sitting at the table and if you make considerably more amount of money than your wife, I'd like to think that you take the initiative and that you pay the bill. If you're at a party and you see a girl who you think you're attracted to, as a man, you take the initiative and you go and talk to her. If your house gets broken into, as a man, you take the initiative and you step forward. But I guess you could break that down and say, well, Daniel, you know, maybe that's 50% of the time, depending on the context. But maybe if you're in the kitchen and you're both cooking something, but you got no idea what the recipe is or how to do it, now she's the leader. Now you follow her lead. You know, maybe you're in a place, in an environment, man, where she's been there 10 times, you've been there once. Well, now she's the leader, right? You follow her lead. I guess one thing that's really interesting is this world of, you know, we don't need men to be leaders. This is one thing that I'm hearing. We don't need your support. You know, a woman says, I don't need your money. I can be successful on my own. Okay. But don't you want to be with someone else? Like don't you want to have someone else with you? And I think ultimately the theory here is this. A lot of women say, I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need a man, but I want a man. I disagree. I think every woman needs a man, and I think every man needs a woman. It's 2021. You got to say, I think every person needs another person romantically. If you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need your basic needs, you need your food, water, you need your security, you need your self-esteem, and you need love and belonging. In my opinion, a woman saying, I don't need a man, I think that's a lie. Psychologically, from meaning in life and yeah, just for your health, you absolutely do need a man, and a man needs a woman. Now, if you're talking about income, I understand where you're coming from. If a girl says, I'm an independent woman, I understand. If you live in the West, you've got a lot of options. I'm not talking about our poor friends, depending on how you look at it, in Saudi Arabia, who are women. But if you're a woman in the West and you go study, you can get a PhD, you can get a job, you can make over 6 figures. You do not need a man in order to live a successful life. 100%. I couldn't agree more. But I think communication is key, and I know I'm not the only young man who says this, but thinks this way. But I think I represent a lot of them when I say this. A lot of people my age, we're growing up, and we're not really sure what the dynamic is going to be. Now, again, every person is going to differ, person to person. But what do you do? Like, if you go out to dinner, and if I pay for the dinner, is she going to assume I'm doing that because she can't pay for her own meal, because she's cheap, or because she's broke, or because she can't hold down a job? Or is she going to look at that as chivalrous, kind, and wow, he's such a gentleman? If I go to the dinner and I say, hey, or I don't offer to pay for the bill. Like, she goes, hey, I got it. I'll be like, great, that sounds good. Will she look at me as like, wow, this guy's really progressive and kind, and he's not like a patriarchal, you know, misogynistic guy? Or will she be like, wow, this guy's cheap, he's a piece of garbage, or how come he wouldn't even pay? So a lot of people don't know how to go about it. And I think the big thing about this is geographically, right? It's kind of where you're living, and the place that you're living, there'll be like a majority that sways one way or that sways another. But we're really in this fascinating place of these values, right? Of what do you consider important? And based on that, you're going to interact and you're going to carry yourself. Are people equal when they're in a relationship? I would make an argument and say people are absolutely equal when they're in a relationship, but they have their unique gender roles. again, if there is an intruder or there's something harmful that needs maybe some sort of physical solution, I'd like to think that the man will step up and do something about it. There's certain things, folks, I can't wrap my head around. And call me misogynistic, call me traditional, but I can't visualize a girl driving over to a dude's house, you know, and as he gets out of his home to walk over, she goes and she opens up the door for him. You know, I can't imagine they park, the girl gets out of her side of the car, she goes over, opens up the door for the guy, and like she reaches out for his hand and helps him out of the car. You know what I mean? I don't imagine her like leading forward and holding open the door. And I don't know if those are more like masculine traits or again, like maybe that's just leading in my head, but it just comes off weird to me. And I don't know why that is. I think a huge part of it is just, it's socially, right? It's what you see it's what you don't see on TV. It's what you don't see growing up. So that's why when you think of it like that, it doesn't look right. Like it just looks weird. And I'm curious about how many guys there are like me. And the question is, if we think that that looks weird, is that one of those things that when we engage in those sorts of relationships, does that become normal once you see that over and over again? And maybe the media starts depicting that more often, like women behaving in those sorts of behaviors, or no, like does it not become normal? You know, does it just stay weird? And the people who don't like that, they just reach out and they try to find dating partners who think the same way that they do and maybe act the same ways that they do as well. I'm curious. I'm very, very curious, and I think it really depends on the individual, just to kind of see, you know, what their morals are, what their values are, and what they believe their role is in a relationship. I think this is going to be really, really fascinating over the next 10 years to see, especially in the West, if a man and a woman are in a relationship, so just heterosexual people, what is, like, my buddy asked me once, we were in the car, and he said, Daniel, what does it mean to be a man? And I looked at him, I said, I don't know. I don't know what it means to be a man. 20, 30 years ago, I thought I did. I thought it was the guy the breadwinner, right? The guy who pays all the bills, you know, the strong guy, the guy who fixes up everything if it breaks, the confident one, you know, the courageous one, the aggressive one, the driven one, the one who says how it's done, the dependable one. But in recent times, it looks like these ideas have been challenged and they've been attacked as patriarchal. Being driven is bad. Being too competitive is bad. Being too aggressive is bad. Okay. Well, being too soft is bad too. Being not competitive all the time is bad too. Not being able to be aggressive is bad too. And at some point, we just got into this world where we look at those kind of masculine characteristics and we go, you know what? We want to shy away from those. Folks, a relationship is a whole. It's two people. When you begin to change the dynamic of one character, of one role, now you've changed the entire relationship, you know, because these people, they're interdependent on one another, meaning one's role and one's actions, they significantly impact the other person's role and the other person's actions. So if the man of 2021 starts acting differently than the man in, let's say, the 1990s, now the woman's going to start to act differently. Or vice versa. Maybe the woman expects certain things of the man that the man now has to adjust to her liking, to her well-being, to her attitudes. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I think it'll be interesting. I think it's inevitable because as women have gotten more rights and just they've done better off in life and in the workplace and they're making more money, I would like to think they're more successful. We're going to see a dynamic change in relationships. And I'd like to think that it's for the better. I think it's going to be a little shaky in the start just to make sure everyone's on the same page. But overall, I'd like to think that it's not a bad thing. But we'll just have to see and find out. And can those people who are more like myself, like the more traditional minded people, come around and begin to accept kind of these different ways of living? My only worry with that is that we will go so extreme the other way. We'll throw out aggression, competitiveness, leadership, initiation, that we will create these men who lack something. And I don't know what. And I wish I could tell you. I don't know what the byproduct of this will be. Maybe it's men wearing dresses. Your boyfriend sees you wearing a dress. You go, that's a great dress. I'm going to go and buy myself the same one. Now you've painted your nails, he's painted his nails. You're wearing a dress, he's wearing a dress. He asks you to come pick him up. You go pick him up. You guys drive over. Maybe you pay for the bill. Maybe you like it that way. Maybe you want him to wear a dress and wear nails and be a little bit more feminine. Maybe that's what more women are looking for. I don't know. And if that's the case, do the rest of the men conform to that kind of more feminine ideal? Or do they stick to their the old school, the traditional, the toxic masculinity? I'm not sure. I feel like there will definitely be a backlash, because whenever you have a force moving in one direction, you will have an automatically equal force moving in the other direction, as we have with everything in life, like the yin and yang. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. So going back to the questions of, should a man be the leader in the relationship? 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't even a question. But now we're getting in a very fascinating place. And my own answer to that is, I think the man and woman are equal in the sense of they both view each other respectfully, but they both have their distinctive gender norms. There are certain things that are expected of the man, certain things that are expected of the woman. Many people don't think like that anymore. I might be one of the few who has that attitude. And I think only in the future, I think it'll be less and less and less, until maybe eventually the lines become completely blurred. Next time someone breaks into your house, your boyfriend with a dress is going to stand behind you. And I hope the girlfriend can throw a good one too, because, you're going to have to display some of those quote unquote masculine characteristics. And maybe there won't even be any more masculine or feminine characteristics. They'll just be characteristics, because we're all the same, right? I don't know where we're going. I'm excited. I want to keep doing this podcast, and I'll update you throughout the years. And then in 2026 or in 2029, when we're talking about what's happened and what the byproducts are of this sort of thinking, I'll be like, folks, remember I did a podcast episode back in 2021. I told you this would happen. I told you I was cautious. I told you I was excited because I thought good things were coming for gender equality and this and that. But I told you that we'd go through this kind of weird transition. So let's see what happens. Ooh, do I tell this story or do I hold it for the next episode? You know what? I'm going to hold it for the next episode. You've been spoiled too much already. Folks, thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure. This was another episode of the Danial Experience. Stay safe. Stay happy. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.